Hi, listeners and viewers. I wasn't sure whether or not to put what I think is going to be a really juicy conversation onto the Better, Bolder, Braver podcast or the new Francis Fogel Story Strategist podcast. So you'll be delighted to hear that I've decided to put it onto both. And because I think both of my audiences will get a lot out of this conversation, and I won't go into why, because it's all going to come out in the wash. But welcome, Joe Portsmouth, to both the Better, Bolder, Braver podcast and also the Francis Fogel Story Strategist podcast. I'm going to ask you in a second to tell us where you are, what you do, and about the pretty amazing course that you have built and what the purpose of it is. Before you do that, I'm just going to say that Joe and I are new friends, and I would call Joe part of what Simon and I call our marketing family. And that is to say, those around us in the world of good ethical marketing who are teaching people to put themselves out there with more clarity, confidence, and joy. That's the kind of person that we have on the Better, Bolder, Braver podcast. But on the Francis Fogel Story Strategist podcast, and I should say not but, or therefore, Joe, I should say, that's a little in joke that Joe will understand and maybe can expand on later. On that podcast, my purpose is to profile both brilliant companies that I think are doing what good looks like in terms of storytelling, but also to profile those experts in the storytelling space who can help companies understand how they can capitalize on heritage stories and use them as I would like to see them using stories across not only marketing a brand, but also employee well-being, customer retention, and community outreach and care. Hence, I wanted you to be on both of those podcasts. So I'm going to stop waffling now. Over to you. How are you arriving? Where are you? What do you do and why?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me. Didn't know that I was going to be on both, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, so I'm based out of New York City. I've lived here pretty much my entire life in New York. And I work at a company called Beard Club, which is a subscription e-commerce brand for guys that want to grow their beard. So either they struggle with beard patchiness or their beard grows slow in general. Most of our customers are coming to grow a bigger, thicker beard. So there I'm the senior director of customer retention. So that's my 9 to 5. And then I mean, the main reason that we probably got connected was because of all the things that I'm working on the side. So I've been writing online on Twitter and LinkedIn for the last 2 years about copywriting. Started a newsletter about a year ago that's at just over 15,000 subscribers on the topic of copywriting and storytelling, and recently launched that course about a month or two ago on the topic of how to use storytelling and copywriting. And so I think you could correct me if I'm wrong, but that was probably the main reason that we ended up getting connected, right?
Yeah, I started following people who are talking about storytelling in my effort to research ahead of launching this new business of mine, Francis Storyteller Strategist. And you really jumped out as somebody who was just kind of geeking out and getting quite scientific and providing some really helpful guidelines for people. And yeah, there's a lot about storytelling, isn't there? And
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I want to make a point about to people listening is that it's not necessarily that what Joe and I stand for, or rather, what I don't think what we're saying is we're doing anything terribly new. from my side, I see a lot of people using storytelling in marketing, a lot, and then only using it in silo. And it's such a waste, because the stories that people are telling for marketing purposes are not being used for customer retention and loyalty and a sense of inclusion, are not being used for employee well-being, are not being used in their community outreach strategies. And apart from anything else, it's such a waste of money to spend so much money on your marketing and branding to tell this fabulous story if you're not then going to just simply capitalize on the same story to inform the strategies across the other three areas of practice. There's something that sort of feels a bit sinister and sort of unethical about using a story in marketing all over the place and not making sure that it's carrying through into everything else that you're doing. So for me, it's not, oh, I'm a new storytelling. No one's ever heard of it. I know that everyone's talking about it. And I think, what I see from you, and do correct me if I'm wrong, is that you also are not saying, I am bringing you something that's never been done before. But what you do is break it down. And I think your course is so brilliant. So I do want you to talk about that now. Just kind of making it bite-sized, making it palatable for people for whom storytelling perhaps is, this kind of mysterious and scary thing that they think they can't do for themselves.
Yeah, I was definitely probably in that bucket for a long time, because when I think of storytelling, historically, I've always thought of 500-page Harry Potter books and, fiction novels and all that type of stuff. You don't really think about the shortest form of that, which is really just taking one person from point A to point B, and there's a transformation along the way, or they overcome some challenge or conflict along the way. And that's like really what the heart of a story is all about. And so there are ways to get elements of storytelling into your copywriting in a much shorter and condensed way that I never really thought about until I started studying it a lot more. And so that's kind of one of the misconceptions that I had before studying storytelling to where I'm at now. And I can just see the difference in how the writing transforms after, having that mindset shift.
So I think you've just touched on something that I actually haven't really thought enough about, Joe. So I'm really grateful to you for it, which is simply the case that one can become hopefully a lot more confident in many other areas when one becomes better at storytelling. It's not just the stories that get better, is what I'm hearing you say, or maybe I'm just reading too much into what you're saying.
Yeah, could you maybe elaborate a little bit more on what you're saying?
I'm thinking about what it feels like, and we're going way off piste here, so I don't want to spend too long on this. But I think what just came to me whilst listening to you was the more and more you tell good stories, the more interested people might be in you.
I think that is definitely true from my experience of writing online, like building a personal brand. Sounds icky. That was another misconception I always had. I've never been definitely an introvert, never been one to talk about myself. But in what I've learned over the last 2 years is that when you're writing online to other people, whether that's me posting on my own LinkedIn channel or my profile, or it's me writing for the Beard Club, telling stories is how you better connect with the audience, whether that's as a brand or as a person. So I have the experience of doing both, and you can see how it changes the way that people interact with the brand. Whether that's you or an actual business, because it makes you more relatable. Stories is, at the end of the day, it's like about connection, being more relatable, and then that's what builds that better relationship with your audience and your customers.
Really like that. Thank you. So let's get back on piece. Oh, one more question on that. So how did it feel to you to go from working in marketing to having 15,000 followers? How did that
Uh,
make you feel as a human being?
it was weird. I mean, I had started and stopped like trying to grow a following on Twitter maybe 3 years ago, got zero traction, then came back at it 2 years ago with a different mindset and approach and saw a lot more success. So when I think about myself now and what I do versus where I was at 2 to 3 years ago, it's like a completely different life. Talking to 15,000 people in a newsletter, 25,000 people on LinkedIn, and 50,000 people on Twitter. It's pretty weird to think that like those numbers could fill up a football stadium. It just doesn't seem, and it's just I'm just talking about copywriting and storytelling and stuff like that.
So modest. Um, Charming, modest. Does that make for a good story? Tell us tell us about the story writing playbook. What is it? How did you why was it born?
Um, the way that I was born was I don't want I don't want to work a 9 to 5 forever. So I've like over the last 2 years, everything I've been doing with writing online is just thinking about, what's the highest leverage thing that I could do outside of my full-time job. I don't think I have the energy or um, time to build a business on the side. So I thought I enjoy writing. So I'll start writing online and see where that takes me. And then as my following grew, I thought, okay, then what's the next step here? How can I monetize that audience? And I knew that would be through courses, or that was at least one avenue that I wanted to try out. And so next thing that I needed to decide was what's the biggest problem that my audience faces, or what's a topic they're most interested in. And I had been writing my newsletter for maybe 6 months or so. And in every newsletter, I share, in addition to like a deep dive on one topic, I share about 5 links or so on different topics of copywriting. So there's one link for storytelling, one for how to use psychology and copywriting, one about just general copywriting principles, one about frameworks, and stuff like that. And then I noticed every single week, almost without fail, the most clicked on link was the storytelling related article or tweet or whatever I was sharing. And so there was a clear interest in storytelling from my audience. So then I started to reach out to people and just ask them more about like, why are you interested in storytelling? Why is this topic resonating? And I think it kind of goes back to a lot of the things we talked about earlier, where brands or solopreneurs that are just trying to build a business for themselves, they want to build deeper relationships with their customers or their fans or their followers. And so, naturally, I wanted to combine those things together. And for me, storytelling in copywriting was the way to do that, because when you tell stories, it feels less like marketing. And I think, something that goes around, people talk about is like the best marketing doesn't really feel like marketing. And I think stories are a great way of doing that. And stories are a great way of selling without really selling. And so all of the emails leading up to my course, I wasn't really hard selling anybody. I was just telling stories about my journey of using stories in copywriting. And then that is what eventually, like, it's almost like kind of meta, where I sold people on how to sell with stories. And then that was what the course was about, and showed them how to do the same thing. Um, but yeah, that was kind of a long-winded answer, but that's kind of how it was all born, really.
So I want you to, if you can, uh just maybe if you, I don't know how you'd feel about this, because of course one needs to buy the course.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be good if you could share here how people can do that, how much it is, and how long you think it takes to get through, and what you get as a result of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like you, if you don't mind, and I think, this is good promotion for the course, to actually just go through what each chapter, each module, and each chapter covers, so that
Yeah.
people get a sense of how to break down what you need to do to write a good story.
Yeah.
We're not just talking in sort of theoreticals that nobody really understands. So
Mm-hmm.
what's the breakdown of the course, please?
Yeah, that I'm a very systematic, like driven person, so that's the I'm happy to do that, and that's like kind of how I designed the course, is with that kind of mindset. So I broke it down into 4 parts. The first chapter is the most theoretical of the 4. So it's what are the top storytelling techniques, and just general things to know about storytelling, that like what makes a good story. And one you kind of like alluded to with your inside joke earlier was this but therefore concept, where a good story has conflict in it. And when you're telling a story, if you just look at the way that it's sequentially building up, if there's a lot of, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, that's not the blueprint for a very compelling story. And I learned this from the guys who created South Park, that this is one of their techniques that they're famous for. And so if you just go through your story and you start seeing a lot of and thens, and you replace them with but therefores, that it signals a change or a shift. And that is what makes stories compelling. It's that like up and down nature. So that's like one example of one of the techniques or principles that I talk about in that first chapter. And then chapter 2 is all about how to find story ideas, because like another thing that was a misconception that I had was I don't have a story to tell. And I hear that from a lot of people that I talk to when it comes to using storytelling in copywriting. And I've learned that just like couldn't be farther from the truth. Everyone has stories to tell, and I think people get caught up on. I always go back to this idea of like people think of storytelling as this complex Harry Potter novel with 50 characters and all of these intricate details. And really the things that I think people relate to the most is the basic stuff. Like one example that I share in the course is every single day I have this like story journal, where at the end of every day I write, that book, I write down 1 or 2 stories from the day that stood out. And if I'm ever looking for a story idea, I can flip through that as one way of thinking of story ideas to tie back to the reader. So like an example of that could be you know one writer that I read his newsletter, he was talking about this copywriting concept of using visual language to persuade people to buy or to do something, to take action. And he talked about a story of him going to the dentist. And so instead of him just giving you the plain description of this is how you use visual language in your copy, these are some examples, he doesn't set it up that way. He sets it up with a story. He just goes right into him saying, I was at the dentist, and he was telling me that how important it is to floss. And he's like using all of this dialogue where he's talking about how the dentist is talking to him while he's got all these tools in his mouth, and he's trying to respond back, and he's like his words are muffled because he's got like 15 to like something in his mouth, and he's describing that in his writing. And then that type of visual storytelling, you can picture him sitting in the chair with the tool in his mouth, trying to have the conversation. And then the dentist says, when you don't floss, it leaves these little pieces of bacteria that build up, and it's like termites for your teeth. And that termites for your teeth language is what persuades him to start flossing more often. And so like I think about that example as you know, how to like the story of him just going to the dentist, something that everyone can relate to. He used that to then talk about and explain this, you know, maybe boring copywriting principle. So that's like kind of where chapter 2 is all about, is like there's stories all around you and you just have to find ways to document them and use them in your copywriting. And then chapter 3 is all about frameworks. So taking your ideas and the principles from the first 2 chapters and putting them into proven frameworks that lead to a good story. So one of them that I use in the course is before after bridge. And that's one of my favorite ones to use because it highlights that transformation, because it shows you where someone started, where they got to, and what led them to get there. And that's pretty much the recipe for any story. And then the 4th chapter is me walking through all of the first 3 chapters with actual students of the course. So I had 4 students sign up for the beta version of the course, and I hopped on phone calls with them, and they explained scenarios where, like, different types of scenarios where they needed help with their copywriting. So one person was running a B2B business and he needed help with using storytelling in a landing page. Another guy wanted to write better newsletters that sold his coaching program. And so I took their situations and applied the frameworks and the process that I've outlined in the first 3 chapters. And you can see how it all comes together in you know, a relatively short amount of time to write an email for it or a landing page.
Awesome, thank you. And I think there's just there were 2 references in there that I just want to expand on for listeners or watchers. The first is I think it's Eddie Schleiner's How to Write Good Copy newsletter, is it not? That you
Very good copy is the name of
very
it.
good copy, that's it. Yeah, I've also been following Eddie for a while, and I also recommend his newsletter. Second, and that's the dentist story, isn't it? Yeah. And then it's really funny because when I was working through your course myself and you came to this bit, I was like, that book. So this book, the story behind this book for me, and for anyone who's listening on the podcast, I'm holding up a book which is also referenced in Joe's course, and it's called One Line a Day, a 5-year memory book. And there's a link to it in Joe's course. You can buy it on Amazon and probably in other places if you prefer. It's by Chronicle Books, published by Chronicle Books. Each page in this keepsake journal features space to record the events of the same calendar date over the course of 5 years. As the pages fill, you'll discover happy coincidences and relive forgotten moments, adding unexpected joy to all your days and years. Now, this book was bought for me by a really good friend for my husband, as part of my husband and my wedding present. And I'll be honest, that was 8 years ago, by the way. Literally done nothing with it. Absolutely nothing. I haven't even put my name in the if found, please return to bit, which is easy. I haven't even done that. So doing your course alone, never mind the wonderful other prompts that come out of it, has meant that I'm really excited about starting my One Line a Day book, because and with no offense intended to my husband, rather than accounting for every fabulous day of our marriage, which now looking back would have been a really good idea, because in that time we've had 2 children, we've navigated COVID, I've also given birth to 2 new businesses. So shame that I didn't bother. But I think what I want to do now is, inspired by your advice in the course, write down the most mundane thing, so that looking back, so starting with 2020, it'll be 2024, because I'm a bit OCD, and I just can't possibly start it before January the 1st. So I'm gonna have to wait however many weeks before then. But just write down the most mundane thing, see if there is anything that comes up over the 5 years that kind of brings them together, and use them as you suggest, as a way, just sort of picking a date at random and seeing if a story can come out of it. So I really appreciated that. And I would also encourage people listening to think about, if not buying the book, just simply somehow journaling, 1 line a day. It's a lovely idea. Where's the course, Joe? Where can one get the course? How much does it cost?
So what I'm trying to do right now is like multiple launches of it. So I launched it for a limited time at the end of September, and shut the doors at the end of September. So you can't buy it anywhere right now. But what I plan to do is, it's been about 1 month since students went through the course. I'm going to set up some calls with students to like get more feedback, since it was the first iteration of it. So I want to get feedback from people. What was most helpful? What was great? What needs work? And I want to keep iterating on it for future launches. So the next launch of it will probably be some point at the beginning of next year, just as I get through Black Friday, Cyber Monday at work. But the course is $197. And yeah, I plan to do multiple launches of it, just to keep refining it and make it as good as possible over time.
Cool. So it's interesting actually that I can't help myself. We look after coaches in the Better, Bolder, Braver community who will often come up with a really good idea for a course as a product within their coaching business, and we call coaches people helpers. So we're not particularly religious either about whether or not you have a coaching qualification, because that's not our job. And there are some really amazing organizations, the ICF, the Association for Coaching, we're very close to in the UK, whose job it is to invite coaches who want to call themselves coaches to consider getting a qualification. So we don't step on their toes. The other thing is that we like to sort of democratize the people helper community, and a lot of people can't afford or don't choose to buy into the kind of coaching framework and still have a lot to give to the world, and they're welcome in the Better, Bolder, Braver community. So those people helpers, those coaches that we have as members, as I say, are thinking about many ways that they can help, and one of them is course creation. And I have a couple of questions to you as a people helper that feel to me like the kind of questions that I might ask one of our community members or one of my kind of one-to-one clients. So if you don't mind, I'm quite curious, and I think listeners will also be interested to hear what do you see the course being part of in terms of a bigger picture for you? Let's say you didn't have to do a 9-to-5 job anymore. Would the course be all there was, or what else are you imagining? What's the story that you have in your mind about what else you'd like to do with it, or what else around it you'd like to do?
Yeah, definitely. It would be more like live conversation. So the course is fully passive right now. So you can, yeah, and you had mentioned this earlier, it takes like 60 to 90 minutes to get through it all together. I talk really slow, so I recommend everyone watches it on 1.5 or 2x speed so you can get through it really quickly in about an hour or so. And that was some feedback that I got, was that everyone enjoyed how quick and succinct it was, and like straight to the point, and that it was still easy to understand on 2x speed. But yeah, what I see it developing into is more conversations and like more of a community. So I would love to turn it into a place where people who take the course can then be part of this ongoing community, where we either have weekly sessions, or we have some sort of Slack group or whatever, where people can just pop in and ask their questions or bounce ideas off of each other related to copywriting and storytelling in general. Because it's a never ending practice, really. And I know that I'm thinking about it every day at work, and having other people to just discuss challenges with and work through it together. That type of feedback is always super beneficial. But yeah, I don't have the time to manage that community. I've tried to do a community in the past with while working full time, and it's way more work than I could have ever imagined. And so, if there's a time when I'm not doing that 9 to 5, and the I have the time to do that community, I think that is one of the next things that I would consider. Yeah, set some sort of like group atmosphere around the topics that are taught in the course.
I really want to help you to build this thing. So I think it would be great. But I, yes, obviously agree that running a community is no mean feat. And I have a business partner. And certainly in the first early days, when you are trying to create the right space, it's a very important time to be very intentional about that space. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think a lot of the people, so another thing Joe talks about in the course, which those of you in the Better Bolder Braver community, or anyone that follows us frankly will be aware of, is that we talk all day long about something called the journey of consciousness, which is 5 levels of awareness, and Joe also talks about it in the course. And one of the things we realize is that our community members are not aware that what they really need is to not be working alone as coaches. What they want is to know how to do good ethical marketing. And they see that we have a course ourselves, the Coaches Marketing Journey course, which is a 70 video course, which we host on Mighty Networks. Joe hosts his course on Kajabi, which is another really good course platform.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what people tend to buy into, just as they would with Joe's course. How to do good storytelling, how to do good ethical marketing. It's when they get there and they come to the check-in sessions, and they come to my reflection and confidence session once a week, which is sort of like therapy for people trying to do marketing. That's when they realize that actually it's the doing of marketing together, or the doing of storytelling together, and the opportunity to kind of look at what I call what is known widely as the shadow side of things. And I'm always keen for people to talk about how it really is making them feel to put themselves out there in the world. And similarly, another thing I was moved to start Francis Fogel Storytelling Strategist because of is there's so much about what are the positive stories that you can tell about your brand and how fabulous you are, and where's space for the shadow side, where's the space both intimately and privately to talk to somebody about some of the stuff that you're perhaps not proud of, or that your heritage represents that you're not particularly proud of, or the business that you've been building hasn't been very good at. And is that enough? Are you enough just to talk about in private, or indeed would you like to be able to talk about that in public and own it? And I think that's really important. Otherwise, we just continue to whitewash in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the community also is a place for people to be able to kind of play with things that might be a bit delicate before they put them out there in the world. And I dare say that's probably what you're thinking as well, isn't it? Because talk to us a little bit about that, the shadow side of stories, and maybe we can allude to people like Brene Brown and vulnerability and what it is to kind of decide what are your boundaries when you're storytelling. Can you maybe talk to us about your experience or research around that?
Yeah, two thoughts popped into my mind while you were like bringing up these points. One, I think social media in general feels like it's like a popularity contest, or it's like who's winning the most at life. And one thing that stands out is when people share their challenges or their struggles, because that is a lot more relatable than this is how I'm making $100,000 a month, like those types of posts. Um, and so when people open up about struggles and challenges that they're going through, I think that those types of posts probably more than anything build deeper relationships with their audience or their customers. It's a little different for, I guess, a business. Like I don't know if at the Beard Club we would be writing about the challenges we're facing at like on the marketing team or stuff like that. But what we would talk about would be the challenges of growing a beard. So how the founder or the CEO came up with the idea because they struggled with growing a beard in their lives. Like that type of content, I think, plays really well. And the key thing about it is that it has to be authentic, because when it's like people can sniff inauthentic content a mile away. So when you do it right, like telling stories about your real challenges and struggles that you're going through, makes you come off as more relatable, not perfect. And I think that's really important when you're telling stories online. And then another thought I had was like when you talked about like being vulnerable in communities. One story that I had is I created another course before this storytelling one, about a year before, a year ago, before this last one. And it was about how to use email marketing for your e-commerce business, because that's what I do in my 9 to 5. So when I was building the wait list for that course, I initially really struggled. My audience was a lot smaller at the time. I had 10,000 followers on Twitter, and I think that was pretty much it. So in order to get into this program on Maven, where Maven is this cohort, have you heard of Maven? It's like a cohort-based learning platform where all of the courses are like live. Like you show up 1 hour a day for a week and you learn the course from the person teaching it. So I tried doing one of those, and in order to get into their program where they teach you how to develop a cohort-based course, I needed to get a certain number of waitlist signups. And I was really struggling to get those signups from Twitter, and I was thinking of giving up. And so I'm talking to my friends in a group chat of 10 to 15 other creators that are like working on the same types of things. And I said, I'm really struggling with this, and like I think I'm just going to give up and not go through with the course. And then multiple people just say like, you're crazy, like keep going, try this, try that, this worked for me. Like that type of feedback pushed me to keep going and keep taking shots of it. And then I was like, pretty much the next post that I made went viral, got a couple thousand likes, and then easily helped me hit my waitlist goal. So it's like when I think about the community aspect that we're talking about, where you're sharing challenges that you're going through with other people who are going through the same types of things, having that, that support system really makes a difference sometimes. And so I think there's a lot of value in that.
Thank you. Thank you. What an interesting story about Maven. I sort of have a number of thoughts on it and concerns that you're pressured into having a certain amount of
Well, yeah, they wanted to be the program is free, so they want to make it as like they want to make sure that everyone who's joining is qualified and is going to stick with it. And so I actually do think it's a pretty good system that they have to make sure that the people that come in are committed to doing it and they're going to stick with it. And because it is like that program in itself, I don't even know if they're still doing it because it was a year ago, but that program in itself is a community because like I'm learning alongside other course creators how to do this for the first time. And so we would break out into sessions and I would learn from other people who are trying to create the same types of courses on different topics. And it was just like another type of community and support system. So I think having a certain bar for those types of things, while you don't want to like exclude people, I think it makes sense in that setup.
Yeah, no, I hear you. That's really interesting. Maybe offline we can talk a bit more about that.
Mhm.
I have to ask you, and for anyone who's not watching the video, you need to be aware that Joe is sporting a very healthy looking beard. So before we've got maybe 10 minutes before we round off, and I want to talk to you about email marketing, but before we go any further, have you used your own product? Is that why your beard looks like that?
No, I actually I don't use our growth products, but I use our trimmer and our beard scruff cream, and the shampoo. Those are my three favorites. The growth products are really for, filling in patches, which I don't really,
So they
I'm fortunate enough to not have had that issue. But yeah, I think the trimmer is ironically like we're really a beard growth company. That's where most of our customers come from. But I think we have the best trimmer I've ever used. And I'm not just saying that because I work there. I've tried a lot of trimmers over the years, and this one's really actually really good quality. And then yeah, I like the cream and the shampoo to make it softer and less itchy.
I never thought in all my time that I would be featuring a beard trimmer and beard shampoo product
Yeah.
podcasts. So this is a first. Thank you. Right, back to storytelling. We don't talk very much about email marketing, and it's something that I'm thinking about myself at the moment. And one of my pet hates is the companies that send you emails to tell you how fabulous they are at writing emails for you, and there's absolutely nothing in it whatsoever that's compelling, that always end up going in the bin.
Mm.
I did actually recently fall for one of these companies, and because they had, I thought, bothered to do some research into who I was, there was not only my name, but also, which is not very difficult to do, but a couple of things in the um, email which made me think, gosh, they've actually bothered to look into me. How lovely. They
Mm.
booked in a call. I said, let's have a call then if you really want to do my email marketing for me. I'm just about to launch a business. It probably is a good idea if I try and build up a email list. I got on the call, and the person who'd organized the call had double booked and sent their assistant to pitch to me, and she had not done any. She asked me to tell her about myself, and I said, well, I'd find it more helpful if you tell me about your product, because that's what you're, I appreciate you care, but presumably you've done a little bit of research before this call. And she was like, no.
Mm.
And their whole shtick is, we take 4 to 5 minutes to look into each client before we write an email if you opt for our human service. Otherwise, you can have triple the amount of people written to if you opt into our AI service, which she unashamedly told me was what was probably used to write the email in the first place to me.
Mm.
So the first thing just to make people aware of is that AI is, and by the way, the other thing that Joe and I both massively champion is AI. So don't get me wrong. Joe talks about it in the course. Funnily enough, I was asked to beta test these bad boys, and I'm holding up to the camera storyteller tactics cards, which presumably you've heard of, Joe.
No,
Oh, These are amazing. So these guys who design these are my new friends, and I very much urge you and others to check out Storyteller Tactics cards by Pip Decks. In fact, I have an affiliate link which will give you 30% off Joe and anyone else that would like to purchase them. They're amazing. Which I'll put in the show notes. And you can also get that off the Better Bolder Braver website. We have a page dedicated to stuff that makes it easier for coaches to do good ethical marketing, and Storyteller Tactics cards are on there, and I'm going to put Joe's course on there if I haven't already. So if you want to give our members a discount, let me know, Joe, and I'll stick the link on. So basically, I was asked to beta test the new version of these, which is all about archetypes, which is another way of looking at how to build good stories. But these cards without the archetypes alone are as fabulous as the first chapter of Joe's course. And they cover off styles of stories, structures of stories, functions of stories, recipes for good stories, characters within good stories, and concepts within stories. It's really a comprehensive, fabulous product, and I highly recommend it for anyone who's battling with stories. I'm about to run a retreat next week, and I'm doing storyteller workshops, but I also intend to do a kind of tarot card round the fire type exercise for people on the course using the cards. So they're really fun. So when I was asked to beta test the second version of this product, I had to think of a real life scenario and work through all the new cards. And what I decided to do, having not seen this yet in Joe's course, was use Chat GPT. And I went through everything I'm going to need to do to launch my new business, chose a card from the archetype deck, and, for example, said, write a love letter to my ideal client in the style of the savior. Or write, and then I said to Chat GPT, now generate 10 social media posts in the style of, and then gave another archetype from the story.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so fun. And within 45 minutes, I had a 33-page document of amazing stuff to use in content. And I think you would probably agree with me that one is always going to need to top and tail and go fastidiously through stuff that Chat GPT generates for you, in order that you're not just churning out more AI smelling stuff like everyone else. But as you say in the course, it's a really, really nice sort of way of generating thought and giving you inspiration. So I want you to talk about that in a sec as well, but I just want to finish my point about emails. She admitted to me she'd used AI. Please be aware people are using AI for these emails. Do not assume if they feel personal that they necessarily are. So be discerning about whose emails you read. And this is the point that I want you to bring up. How can good storytelling inform emails? And what's your thought about mass emailing people versus, for example, taking the time to be really discerning? You do great positioning work in the course. It's possible, isn't it, not to have to spend a fortune on, and I don't want to discredit, I'm sure there are fabulous agencies out there, but you don't have to do that. You can do your own emails, you can create wonderful emails, and you can build a really good email following without having to get someone to spam 600 people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go on.
Yeah, to your first point, I love using Chat GPT for idea generation, because really, one of the toughest things that everyone deals with as a writer is writer's block, and sometimes like all you need is one line or one thought that sparks the next thought, and I found Chat GPT to be great at that. Like you said, I would never copy and paste an email straight from Chat GPT, because I haven't really found many great scenarios where I think they're delivering, or it's delivering A+ emails. It's always, I'd categorize them as like they're in the B range. So there's always going to need to be that like human touch that you add to it. But it'll get you 80% of the way there, and then you just put your finishing touches on it. So I really like it for just getting started, and then I'll take it from there and kind of weave my own personality into it. And then what was the point you were talking about?
I get this all the time. Simon's like, stop bringing up 3 points and then asking people to respond to them. It's email marketing.
Oh yeah. Personalization versus not. Yeah, that's always something that I'm thinking about. Particularly at Beard Club. I'll just give a quick example. We get different types of customers that come through. So most of them are looking for beard growth, but a lot of them, like myself, as a customer, I wouldn't be interested in beard growth. I'd want to learn more about beard grooming. And then we also have customers who are interested in like body trimming or body wash and like the full body experience. So you don't want to talk to all those people the same way because they're interested in different things. And similar to how you mentioned different levels of customer awareness, I'm not going to talk to somebody about, derma rollers if they don't know the first thing about what they do or how they work, which is like it's a tool used for beard growth. So knowing where different people are at is really important. And when you're reaching out, talking about cold email, it's shocking how many people do not personalize emails, or they think they're personalizing and doing the very bare minimum. And I get so many emails from vendors at work, and 99% of them are going, like you said, auto deleted, or they're just not really speaking to what I'm truly dealing with, or not relevant at all. Like I very, like, if you go to LinkedIn, you very clearly see that I'm working in customer retention at Beard Club, and then I'll get emails about how I can improve my paid ad strategy, which is just something that role would never ever focus on. And so really just taking, like you said, a couple of extra minutes to personalize a message goes a long way, whether it's in a cold email strategy or if it's as a business and you're segmenting your customers. When someone gets an email and they read it and it feels like it was written just for them, that's when you're going to get the best results in terms of conversion rate and getting people to take action. And so it's something that takes more time than mass emailing everybody, but that time is usually worth the ROI, in my opinion.
Thanks, Joe. I think also, just mindful of time, we're going to have to wrap up. But so much of what you talk about is the same kind of stuff that we talk about in Better, Bolder, Braver. Hence wanting to put you on that podcast, as well as the Storyteller Strategist podcast. Yeah, I just want to echo that point. I mean, something that Simon and I talk about is 100 true fans. You don't need, I mean, Joe's got a ridiculous following, but one thing I do want to make clear is that doesn't mean that you're, necessarily in life, not Joe, but, one is necessarily talking to the right people or saying the right stuff. And, I think it can be really overwhelming for people trying to build a business to think they need to have 50,000 followers. It's just not the case. It's not what we aspire to at all. In fact, the opposite. And for example, my business model for Storyteller Strategist is actually to have less than 5. I'm not going to tell you how many clients to work with over a year. That's my business model.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be doing a lot of content because I want to provide a service that isn't necessarily the paid service that's going to pay my bills, but that the business is in service of, if you see what I mean. Mm-hmm. But to your point about people reading emails, I mean, rather spend, in fact, an hour crafting a beautiful email that you can send to maybe 10 people if you just change the name and the job title, do you know what I mean? But who are all in the same boat, who are all potentially having the same problems, challenges, and really feel like you speak to those people and make those people feel seen, heard, and understood.
Mm-hmm.
Have better conversion rates to use that horrible term. And also you're going to attract people that you want to work with, and you're not going to have to bat off a load of people that are not for you. And so much of what our work is about is identifying your own needs, limits, wants, and boundaries as a people helper, so that you can be sustainable and not burn out with a business model that doesn't make sense, surrounded by people that are not your people. So it's been a joy having you on the podcast. Do you have any final thoughts or questions or reflections, Joe, that you want to leave our listeners with?
You had mentioned if people are interested in the course, anyone that comes through, if anyone reaches out to you about it, or I can give you a private link that since it's not live anywhere, if people are interested or not. But either way, if anyone's listening to this and they just want to chat about storytelling in general, you can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter and just message me, and always happy to talk about this stuff. So yeah, just tell me that you heard of me through this podcast, and we'll find a time to connect.
Joe, thank you so much. I'm sure this is not the end of our conversation. And thanks everyone for listening. Till next time.